One of the most interesting and lively discussions that you will find among Islamic scholars is what is the defining characteristic of man and woman? What is it that makes human beings unique? Right? Now, the more faithful of us will immediately say, Iman, Iman Billah. But the jinn also have Iman Billah. The angels have Iman Billah. Some will say, choice. Oh, mashallah. Some will say, choice. But the jinn also worship Allah by choice. The jinn have free will. Some of them are devout, some of them are deviant. So then they start saying, it's the ability to communicate intelligently. It's the ability to speak. And they say, well, you know, they're not sure about that. Some people say it's the fact that we wear clothes. That the human being is the only creature that wears clothes, right? Yusuf is thinking about that. He's like, wait, that is true, right? That
by choice, people put clothes on animals.
People put clothes on animals, but animals don't wear clothes, right? The animals, you know, the dog doesn't get up and say, today I think I'll wear the red and black sweater. Let me get that. He's fine. The albar, the fur it grows, he's fine. But we wear clothes. Some people say one of the most interesting answers I've seen to this question is laughter. You know, man, Islamic studies, it's a very interesting field of study. And I remember a lively discussion among scholars, what is a laugh? You know, because other creatures make laughing noises, but they're not laughing because they were provoked. That laughter is not provoked by jokes. Like when they say the laughing hyena, this is just a part of the hyena's physiognomy, and it's just making a noise that sounds like laughter. But it's not like you tell a hyena a joke. That's not what, but like, many, like even some biologists have a difficult time explaining what is a laugh? Like, where does it come from? That a person can hear something or see something, and there's this like spontaneous release of joy that is audible. And only human beings do that. It's a human thing, laughing. Only human beings. All of my friends that are comedians, they love when I talk. SubhanAllah. Right? Only human beings laugh. That somebody says something, and the thing about laughter, it's often uncontrollable. Like you just hear, you can't even help it. It just, right? You hit a smile, and the sound is just produced. It just comes out, right? Another interesting answer is the ibham, the thumb. They say human beings have thumbs, which makes their hands prehensile. They can do all kinds of complex things with their hands. So they can make tools, and they can, right? But no matter how you look at those, you know, answers or questions, the fact is that خلق الإنسان, that human beings have been created with special qualities. That's what the entire discourse suggests. There are things that make us unique among creation. Of course, the best answer, and it's probably the most agreed upon answer, is the intellect. That even though you have many creatures that exceed human beings in their ability, in their strength, in their longevity, you know, some tortoises live to be 200 years old, right? In their longevity, in their strength, there's something here that human beings have been given that makes them kind of the top of the totem pole in terms of creatures. All of this being made the top, all of this suggests to the author that creation's root is love. And he quotes the verse of Surah Al-Hud, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لِذَلِكَ خَلَقَهُمْ. Allah talks about mercy, and Allah says, for this I have created them, meaning we have been created to be a source, to be an object of the mercy of God. That is the reason that we are here. You know, last week, I was mentioning to the group that of the categories of persons loved by Allah, one of them is the Tawwabun, the people that make Tawbah. And Ibn Ata'illah, the great Egyptian, jurist and scholar of inward knowledge, he said, if Allah loves people who repent, you must conclude that Allah loves people who commit sins. Because you can't be someone who repents unless you are someone who commits sins. You see? And we have to remember, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent eternal knowledge. His knowledge is what we call in Arabic azali, which means Allah is not waiting for anything to happen. This is the meaning of Allah's name, Al-Khabir. Khabar in Arabic is news. If you want to be cool, people in Arabic say, Kayf al-hal? He said, Mal khabar. What's the news? That's like slick. Assalamu alaikum, mal khabar. Mal akhbar, yeah. What's the news? What's new? Right? Al-Hasan, what happened? What's going on? Allah is Al-Khabir because there are no news for Allah, right? Rufi al-qalam, the pen has lifted. Allah is not waiting to see what's going to happen. So if we are at one place in our spiritual development, let's say, think about where you were years ago, or weeks ago, or days ago, or hours ago. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves you in that moment, like you are where you're going to eventually be. Because there are no news for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is why, one of the most interesting statements in this regard is a statement I believe one scholar said, you have to remember, Allah loved Sayyidina Umar when he was in Mecca prostrating to idols. Right? Because Allah knew this is Umar. This is like nobody else could have known. This young, very strong, very aggressive, violent man would become someone that, they said that Sayyidina Umar, by the end of his life, had become such a gentle person that if an animal stumbled in a street in Medina, he would tremble with the fear of God, fearing that Allah would hold him accountable for the discomfort of this animal. That's how Umar ended his life, that if an animal stumbled and he was the Emir, right, he was the Khalifa, he would say, oh Allah, don't take me to account for the discomfort of this animal. And he began his life much different than that, but Allah does not have news, right? So the root of all creation is love. Allah created people to show them mercy. Now he goes into some different opinions about this verse in Surah Hud, mentioning that the worship of Allah is the mercy. Because of course Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, He has not created human beings and jinn except for the purpose of worship. So if a person, rejects the worship of Allah, they reject the mercy for which they were created. If they reject the mercy of Allah, right? Beautiful hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is late. He's praying, and Aisha is observing him, radiallahu anha. And I don't know if we only have one couple in the audience, but one of the most beautiful things to capture is if you see your spouse praying at night, and maybe you get up and you're surprised, you wake up, they're not at your side, you're looking for them, and wherever people normally pray in the house, you go there, you see them praying. You might just stop and observe that. There's a term in Arabic called Zayn al-Abidin, beauty of the worshipers. This idea that seeing somebody engaged in the worship of Allah is beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. Whenever I'm out and about in the city and I just happen upon somebody praying, it's just a beautiful thing. Like you just like in the city, you look, somebody just under a tree making salah. It's like, subhanallah, subhanallah. in the midst of all of this chaos and commotion, movement and commerce. Man, it would have been more eloquent if I said all the C words together. Chaos, commotion, commerce. That would have been more eloquent. But in the midst of all of that, there's just one person taking some time out to worship Allah. So Aisha woke up. She didn't see the Prophet ﷺ. She came into the living space where they normally pray. He was making tahajjud to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And she sat observing him. And the Prophet ﷺ could tell that she admired his worship. So he said to her after he finished praying, you know, Aisha, nobody reaches Jannah except by the mercy of Allah. You know, and it was one of those moments where the Prophet ﷺ wanted to correct a misconception that he could feel growing within her understanding. Like maybe looking at the Prophet, peace be upon him, she would have the misconception that worshiping Allah, entering Jannah is really about your effort. Hence, his effort. So after her observing him, he said, you know, nobody gets to Jannah by virtue of their effort. It is only by the mercy of Allah. And she said, even you, because she had just witnessed how intensely and how fervently he was praying. She said, even you? He said, even me. Even me, right? And there's a lot of discussion within our tradition about this hadith, because you have many verses of the Quran that appear to be at variance. Many verses of the Quran where Allah says, here is Jannah for what you used to do. Your reward is Jannah because of how you used to be, because of what you, like in direct contradiction, apparently, zahiran, to what was mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ. The great scholar Imam al-Nawawi, he said there's no contradiction between the hadith of the Prophet and these verses. The mercy of God that the Prophet is referring to is your worship. This idea that you don't just choose your worship for yourself. God makes you one of the people who pray to him. God makes you one of the people who acknowledge him in his oneness. God makes you one of the people who spend for his sake. God makes you a person of good character, and thereby you are granted Jannah because God was merciful to you in that way. So here he says, Yusuf is looking like, Bismillah, go ahead.
I think that that's kind of, or the difficulty that I might have that maybe other people is, we of course accept predestination in the sense that Allah knows everything that will happen, but we also accept that we have free will over our actions. So
This is one of the mysteries of
it is one of the mysteries, and there is no solution. So it's sort of like well, if you take it to its extreme, Allah has decreed those who will benefit from his mercy and then those who will not.
Of course.
Whereas,
but it's, you know, the way that the people of theology, the mutakallimun, the people of kalam, explain it is that, well, they explain it in many different ways, but the way that is most accessible to me is that from our actions, we have what's called kasb, or we, you know, Allah decrees the action. You don't decree any action on your own. Because if you could decree an action on your own, then Allah would not be omnipotent. He would not be all powerful. If Allah didn't want some tragedy to happen, and you had free will to decide, no, this school shooting is going to happen, but Allah didn't want it to happen, but you said it's going to happen, then this would mean that Allah is not all powerful, right? So Allah does decree everything that happens. But what is decreed for us is in accordance, or it's aligned with what we want. And this is why we are rewarded or punished for the choices that we make.
but I was going to say, I don't know that it's necessary to reconcile those two statements to go that far, because we have the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that he has made mercy wajib upon himself. So even if entry into Jannah is by Allah's mercy, if Allah has made mercy wajib upon himself, then alhamdulillah.
Well, I think you still have the verses of the Quran that mention Jannah being a reward for action, right? This is like the apparent meaning of those verses. So what I think scholars are trying to do is to bring those verses into conformity with what we know to be Allah's mercy.
But isn't it Allah's mercy that those acts are rewarded with entry into Jannah?
Yeah,
So it's not, in that sense, I don't see it as a contradiction. If Allah in his mercy is decreeing that.
Well, this is exactly what he said. You know, he said is that your actions are the mercy of God upon you, right? The fact that you were one of the people who prayed, you were one of the people who gave, you were one of the people of good character. This is a mercy to you, right? This is a mercy to you. But you also have free will to choose, and that was his next point. People can choose not to accept that mercy of Allah. And that is also something that is a uniquely human struggle. You know, one writer, Ali Izetbegovic, the former Bosnian president, he said, human beings are either good or bad, but they're almost never innocent. Right? Meaning we have this human burden of our conscience. Right? We're not like animals, you know, like animals can act on the basis of instinct, and at least we're not able to know whether or not they feel like what they did was good or bad. We don't. I mean, you might be able to scare a dog for urinating in the house and rub his nose in it or whatever people will train their dogs to do. But did the dog really feel bad? Does the dog really feel bad about it? Like, man, that was his favorite rug. I shouldn't have did that. Probably not. We don't have any evidence that animals carry what's called taklif, like the burden of moral responsibility. Animals don't carry it. Human beings carry the burden of moral responsibility, right? No other creature carries the burden of moral responsibility. And because of that burden, we can choose to reject this mercy, or we can accept this mercy. So those were some of my kind of preliminary thoughts. Did you have any other insights from reading? Any questions, comments, ideas? Anyone else? I just want to get us started. I know you asked me for the book. Yeah, you got to get the book. And the PDF is free, right?
Yeah.
So you can get it online for free. Love in the Holy Quran. Love in the Holy Quran. Any other insights, questions, ideas?
I did have one thing that came up a couple of times. So far, I feel like one of the central conceits of the book is that we have to accept that wherever, and you mentioned this at the beginning of your talk, wherever Allah talks about mercy, he's talking about love.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's all fine and good. How come, and I'm not saying I'm the most knowledgeable, but I feel like in my experiences in my reading of the Quran, my reading of translation, I have not seen people make that same equivalent, say wherever, it's this whole book seems to so far be like one, I wanted to talk about love, and so I'm finding evidence for that in the Quran, but it's somebody's thesis about it.
Well, even if we restrict ourselves to English, and I'm asking you just anecdotally, what is mercy? When someone says the word mercy, what comes to mind? What are some of your initial impressions? Mercy.
I would say I don't think that I immediately, before starting this book and this class would have linked it to love. It's more just like compassion for the frailty or the shortcoming of something, I would think of it in the context of maybe the justice system, where you're like, well, this person committed a crime, but if we're very merciful, how do we be as just as possible with this person? And, maybe take into consideration different factors that might have led to it or something like that. So that was, I think, more my concept of mercy.
So what about, and every married couple, I'm sure, had this verse recited at their wedding. وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ, from God's signs. مِنْ آيَاتِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا, that He created from yourselves mates. وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُم مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً, that God placed between spouses love and mercy. Now I'm assuming for that mercy to be effective, Yusuf doesn't need to commit a crime. Now I'm hoping that there's an expression of even though my brother does not appear given to criminality, I'm hoping that there's still some expression of mercy that would exist between you, and you don't seem like a person given to criminality either. But God mentions that between your hearts there's love and mercy. What do you think the mercy means there? And just as a married woman thinking about the verses of Allah, mercy.
So actually, you're saying that, it makes me think of maybe my whole conception of Allah, maybe from the way that I was raised. A lot of people were raised, He punishes, evil or sin, and He rewards good. So I always maybe conceived of it more of like you're punished. Like the mercy is, if you do something wrong, He will forgive you. So it might be that's why I wouldn't immediately link love and mercy, and why when I think of mercy, I think of punishment. It doesn't punish you.
It's subhanAllah. Words are complex and very beautiful. And it's often our background that informs how we hear and understand certain words. Right? So when Allah says in the Quran that His mercy, wasa'at kulla shay, His mercy encompasses everything. Everything does not just mean the things that are wrong, the things that are bad, the things that have, you're down to 10% on this machine. But the things that are wrong, the things that are bad, the things that could be punished, He means everything. Meaning His mercy encompasses everything, which is one of the verses that are central. One of the verses that is central to his thesis is that if mercy were just this quality of forgiving the flawed, forgiving the possessor of shortcoming, forgiving, then it would need to encompass everything. Because the trees don't have any flaws. What do they do? Why would Allah's mercy need to encompass everything? As Allah mentions in the Quran, what did the birds, what did they do? What crime did the birds commit?
I think on a certain level, like an English-speaking context in a, let's say, majority Christian country, a lot of how we might interpret or approach our own theology is influenced by these background concepts. So when we hear Christians talking about love, the Islamic view of mercy is more encompassing than when Christians talk about love as the underpinning of their theology. But we hear the other word and we're like, oh, what's that over there? All these men with beards are kind of just talking about fur and punishment and all this other stuff, as opposed to
like mercy. And so, like the verse about the spouses, there's a lot of tafsir. There's a lot written about, like, what does love, like one opinion is that these are actually synonyms. Mawaddatun wa rahmah. These are just two ways of saying the same thing. That the love that exists between husband and wife and the mercy that exists between husband and wife are the same thing. Now, if people ask me to give wedding speeches, and I do all the time, I always say the difference between the love and the mercy is that the love can be more fickle. Love is something you feel very strongly sometimes, and less so at other times. The mercy, however, should be a constant. See,
I think in the reading that we did from last week, the author has a discussion. A lot of it is maybe in the footnotes of love is of particulars, but mercy is of totality.
totality. That's another point that he makes, that love is of particulars. You know, I heard one relationship therapist, and I don't know how true this is, but it certainly had a poetic ring to it. They said, you like people because, but you love them in spite of. Right? You like somebody because, but you love someone in spite of this, I love them. In spite of that, I love them. Right? So love is kind of the particulars. The mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is more general than that. So in the ayah, going back to the ayah about marriage, mercy should characterize the relationship in totality, meaning the entire relationship is one in which we seek to be gentle with each other. We seek not to be harsh, not to be judgmental. We seek to bring comfort into each other's lives, generally. And then the love might be the particular things. I love her smile. I love her cooking. I love the perfume that she wears. I love his laughter. I love his attention to detail. I love his hospitality to friends and family, like particular things. But the relationship in general is one that is characterized by mercy. But this does suggest at least some, not frustration, but it suggests some challenge to the idea of mercy you mentioned as being restricted to people that do bad things, people that have done wrong are in need of mercy, but not people that have done right.
I'll say that was kind of my conception, maybe from a more immature standpoint of mercy. And it definitely, as I've gotten older, it's expanding. But even when you're saying between people, there should be mercy, or like between spouses, there should be mercy. You know, like every relationship can benefit from that. But isn't it sort of still saying that you are being merciful of someone or towards someone is recognizing some frailty in them and saying it's okay?
I mean,
Like, what does mercy look like as an action, I guess?
mercy doesn't have to be the result of the recognition of frailty. It could be the result of the recognition of beauty, which actually, and as we read forward, he says that love is always because of the recognition of beauty. You know, it's ijab, it's being impressed with something and being attracted to it because you're impressed with it. That's kind of love. But that could also result in a mercy toward that thing. You know, not because you recognize a frailty necessarily. You know, one of the most interesting discussions I've ever encountered, you know, in my study of Islam is scholars talking about why people love things. Why do people, what does it mean to love something? And the funniest one that I remember was one scholar said, human beings are so egotistical that they love their children because their children remind them of themselves. That's why they love their children, because they look at their children and they're reminded of themselves. That's why they love their children. Then they said, istihsan, that you really see something beautiful in something. And that beauty makes you have a heightened regard for that thing. Might not be a frailty. So for instance, like mercy, like what does mercy look like? um, let's say you are sorting through some cards, some old cards. And because you've had them for a very long time, you're just tearing them up and throwing them away. These cards long. But then you see one that is very moving. It's very compelling, it's beautiful. And you decide not to tear it up. You decide to fold it and keep it. That, how you were moved by that, it had nothing to do with frailty. It was a special consideration for that card because of its beauty. Its beauty captivated me. So I didn't treat it like I treated some of the others that were perhaps less compelling to me. That's kind of a way that mercy can also work, right? Doesn't have to necessarily mean that you recognize a frailty. You know, so it's almost like going back to the ayah between spouses. Because I recognize beauty in my wife and in the way that she treats me, the way that she raises my children, I have a heightened feeling of regard for her that might not necessarily be based on a frailty, but it's based on the recognition of beauty, right? And that would also be called mercy, right? That would also be called mercy, if that makes any sense. Sonia is looking like, no. Other insights from the reading? Huh? I mean, I think whenever a person attempts to write, well, I'll say something about redundancy. Mastery of anything is always based on redundancy, right? You know, they say that one of the things that frustrates our spiritual growth is that we are people addicted to novelty. We're addicted to the new, right? If I go to a store, I'm walking down the aisle, the thing that will grab me more quickly than anything else is the word what? New. When I see new, I say, it's new, right? But then you have all of these statements of the Prophet ﷺ about bid'ah, right? Blameworthy innovation, right? Even in the Arabic language, even the word munkar, wrong, it really means unknown from nekira. The word nekira in Arabic means something is unknown. And the word for good means ma'ruf, means known. So there's a certain kind of social conservatism just built into the language that which we know, we are much more likely to consider good. That which is unknown to us, that which is foreign to us, we're much more likely to consider it something bad, right? I feel like unless a person is prepared to work on something, to contemplate certain meanings over and over again, the depth of those meanings will never really reveal themselves to you. And that even though it's less exciting than the new and the novel, right? You know, one person, he had a father, and you know, it's subhanAllah. People now are much more mobile than people in the past used to be. You know, I mean, I bet you in this room, we've probably visited all 50 states in the contiguous, in the United States, just in this room, right? There used to be a time when it was rare for people to leave where they lived. Like Imam Malik only left Medina one time just to make Hajj, and then he came right back. So he only left Medina one time in his life. just to make hajj, and he can't remember. I remember maybe it was Riza Aslan or one of these writers who was saying, do you realize that if you are in New York City, in Times Square, at the height of the tourist, height of the tourism season, you might see more people in that one day than the Prophet ﷺ saw in his entire life. If you just sit in Times Square in New York City for one day, you'll see more people on that one day than the Prophet ﷺ seen in his entire life. And so this brother, he used to travel a lot. And he was telling his father about his travels. And his dad said, you're probably really impressed with yourself that you've done so much traveling. Try sitting in one place for 70 years. That's even more, like he was saying, that will reveal more to you about people, about life, about change, about culture, than traveling all over the world. Right? People that have been on the west side of Chicago for 50 years and just watched it change. It's the people, the sounds, it's amazing. People like I said, I've been living here for 45 years. It's so different, right? It's not, it's not what it used to be. So my point is, one of the difficult things about reading traditional books, and he's a modern writer, but he's writing in a very deliberate, very slow, very tedious style, is that we just get frustrated by that kind of, oh, come on, this again. And I remember Dr. Omar saying to me, if you want to master something, you have to be a person given to incremental repetition, right? You have to be a person given to sitting with something and looking at it over and over again, over and over again, over and over again. This is the only way that you attain mastery of something. And we can liken it to anybody who's mastered anything physical. A person that putts in golf. Do you know how many putts he's taken? Person that shoots free throws in basketball. You look at Steph Curry. You know how many 3-point shots Steph Curry shoot? Like when I was a basketball player, you see me play now, you won't believe I was a basketball player. But I used to be a basketball player. I don't know if Bass have told you I came with Cabrini and did to them guys. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I don't know if they told you. They ain't told you yet? Okay, well, that's it.
They don't talk about the feet.
Yeah, they don't talk about the feet. When Cabrini Green, when the housing project was standing, just ask the Bass, well, wait till I came to play with y'all at Cabrini Green one day, he'd be like,
Was Lemon there?
Lemon was there? Yeah, Lemon was there.
That's what I taught.
Yeah, ask Lemon. Yeah, ask Lemon what I did to them guys at Cabrini. They want to kill, literally. But people would talk about putting up 3,000 shots a day. I put up 1,000 shots in a day. It's the same shot. It's the same shot, but the goal is not just to learn a lot of different shots. I can shoot like this, I can shoot like, it's to master my shot. It's to master my shot, right? Oddly enough, I was talking today with Dr. Sherman Jackson. We were talking about this very idea of that which you do repetitively is a part of your soul. That which you only do occasionally, it's more so a part of your thinking. And he gave an example that the great scholar Ibn Taymiyyah said. He said, if a lion was unleashed and ran into this room and had you pinned in a corner, you might find it difficult to recite Surah Al-Kahf. Because maybe you recite it once a week. But you can recite Surah Al-Fatiha. That's a part of your soul. Right? That's a part of your soul. I had a teacher that was Hafiz al-Quran. And, he used to do a lot of, he used to finish the Quran, a lot of khatams, a lot of khutum of the Quran. And he got into a very bad car accident. He was in a coma. This is Abdul Rahman Salim. He was in a coma. And he was in a coma for a while. He was in a coma for almost a few weeks. It was bad. They didn't know if he was going to make it. And at the end of the third week, one of the nurses said, he's babbling. He's moving his mouth. He's making some noises. And everybody's saying, pleased with that. These are some signs that maybe he's going to come around. And his father visited the hospital, put his ear to his mouth. He was reciting Surat Yasin in a state of unconsciousness. He's reciting Surat Yasin because it had become just a part of him. This is what repetition gives you. This isn't the same as repetition in explication, repetition in presentation, but many Islamic writers write trying to vindicate repetition. Like, modern people, repetition has like they say the word repetition and redundant. They have different connotations. Repetition means something that happens over and over, but it has a positive connotation. Redundancy means something that happens over and over, but it is stale, it's uninspiring, it's boring, it's mumil, right? It inspires boredom because it's so, what's the word? There's a word for this in English. It's trite, it's overused, it's hackneyed, it's like we've heard it before, right? Whereas repetition in a lot of kind of ancient learning cultures was always a source of mastery. That someone has done something over and over and over. Even Malcolm Gladwell, he talks about what, 10,000 hours. You won't become, he must really like Malcolm Gladwell. When I said Malcolm Gladwell, what you look like. Yes.
Well, we're reading a dissertation, so the author has to review, he has to start with the Quran and the Hadith. He has to review all of the prior literature and statements of the major figures on those points. And then only once that foundation has been built,
Then he can offer his own interpretation.
we kind of jumped in with reading the text. There is a very cogent executive summary at the beginning of the book that is much more streamlined in presenting the author's ideas.
Maybe we should just read the executive summary. If you think that's better.
I think that I think maybe before we read a section of the book, we should read the relevant section of the summary.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. Because, this was a book, obviously, I haven't read the book myself. Right, so I'm reading it along with you. When I assign a reading, I'm reading it too. I was at a friend's house in Seattle. He told me that he taught a course on the book. And I said, I'm looking to do something that helps people to connect with the Quran. Something that will bring a different perspective to our worship of Allah and to the Quran. And he suggested this book. So, if we want to reroute, think about kind of how we're doing this, or even if we should do this, I'm open to that.
I think one of the things with academic writing is that people can kind of get lost in the minutia. And so maybe doing the relevant part of the summary and reading the section, people will have the big picture overview. This is what he's trying to do here before getting lost in that.
Okay, let's do, I'll tell you what, let's pause this. I'm going to assign a reading for next week along with the executive summary. And I'm also going to think about some other books that maybe present a similar idea in a more digestible, more accessible way. And that might be better. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens.
And also, we're reading this in English, and the original text was written in Arabic. I think it's very clear and well written for what it is.
No, I actually think this was his dissertation at Oxford.
This was, I think, his dissertation at the Azhar.
Oh.
She was thinking
He originally, I read the acknowledgement. My wife was just like, "Why are you reading the acknowledgements of the preface?"
Yeah. Oh, this was his dissertation at Azhar. And then he translated it. I see.
I feel like also sometimes translations take the juice out of it.
Yeah, translation is Translation is difficult, man. You know, I worked as a translator.
And like just a lot of the new, like in the original, I imagine, he doesn't have to go through the gradations of this word in Arabic and this word in Arabic and this word in Arabic, and that's like the explanation he's adding for us as the audience.
You know, translation is hard primarily because you cannot translate connotation. And sometimes between two languages, there just is no equivalent term, right? There's an approximation, but it's just, so you end up using a lot more words than would make reading, that would make the writing clean and streamlined. And it becomes, like you say, a little bit taxing to read because you're using more words than you probably would use in an original.
I'm not hating on book.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, look, this was like, I was looking for a book. I was in Seattle that weekend. I was like, I saw the cover. I was like, this is the book. But maybe it's not the book. I mean, you know, I mean, like for me, you know, subhanAllah. You know, when I think about a good class for Mondays, I think about something different than this, in that I want something that a person can just come in and you don't have to have any prior knowledge of the discipline or the course, just to come and benefit. You know, these are, I really intend, like this space and Tuesday night, just, you know, I'm not trying to, I don't have a clear curriculum that I'm trying to kind of build a person's literacy Islamically. I just want it to be a place where a person can be spiritually renewed. Just come in, and this is definitely different than that being, you know, a dissertation. So maybe, I don't know, maybe we'll choose something else. Maybe we'll choose something else. Maybe I'll choose something I have a little more experience with. We'll see what happens for next week. Other ideas?
Well, it's maybe in the spirit of last week, but I have so much more dates to offer to people.
Oh, Bismillah, Bismillah, of course. Bismillah, Ahlan bik.
His parents just came
My
back.
parents came back from Umrah, so they're
MashaAllah.
fresh from Medina.
Jazakallah khair. Three, just a little. So, three.
Well, hey, baby, I'm just close to get the circle five. It's in the storage right now.
Subhanallah.
Brother, it's up to you to
No,
say move, so he said, just put it in the storage.
subhanallah. You know, something like 65% of the diet of the Prophet was dates.
And the Ajwa dates in Medina were planted by the Prophet.
Allahu Akbar. You know, it's funny because these have the taste is nice, not as overpoweringly
It's the-
sweet as the medjool. And we've grown very accustomed to the medjool. They're very big, they're very juicy. You're like, nice.
So when we say that the Prophet just had these dates, it's not the big ones that they're selling.
Yeah, he was saying that. The medjool are huge. These are like, you know, but the flavor is different. Dates are a superfood, man. They have a lot of sugar though. A lot of sugar.
They're good for pre-workout.
Yeah, dates have a lot of sugar. I said there was one scholar that died from eating dates. And I don't know if this was like a legend or, but he was contemplating some question. And he started eating dates. And he kept eating them. And they said, yeah, like he had some kind of like diabetic shock and he died or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, eating dates. So, other ideas for maybe a better book.
There is a book, and I like this idea because it's a clear-cut format of like a topic a day.
Okay,
Or I have the PDF of a book that I think is pretty good. I can send it to you.
yeah, send it to me. Send it to me. Do you remember who it's by?
No.
Okay.
I have to look. I don't even know.
I
what
mean,
it is, but-
the main one is, I think, by Al-Ghazali, that's which translation you're using, because I think the Ghazali Institute hasn't done like a big formal
Mm.
with the Arabic and the English.
Yeah, maybe we'll do that.
I'll find it.
Yeah, Bismillah. Maybe we'll do that. Other things, considerations about, maybe questions about other things.
What do you think about MBS's new city participating in the middle of nowhere in Saudi? It's gonna be in a straight line.
Yeah, I've heard of it, a vertical, like a vertical.
No, I think it's up
The,
and
the,
down.
the class is being recorded, don't put it on the spot.
No, I actually, we joke about this, but a good friend of mine just got turned around at the border attempting to make Umrah. And yeah, he doesn't know what happened. It's like he went, tried to, make Umrah, and they said, no, you're actually on a list of people who cannot enter KSA.
Was he a scholar?
He's a teacher, yeah. He lived in Saudi for like 9 years. But so I don't know, man. Whenever I hear about these construction projects, I always think about the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that the end of time will not come until the Arab of the desert compete with each other in building lofty structures. Now, when I see this, I'm like, did they just like read the hadith and say, man, look, it's prophecy, we gotta do it. It's prophecy, we gotta do it. I mean, he said it, so we gotta do it. But it seems odd. Then too, I mean, I don't know, man. I think it's difficult for us to appreciate the position of Saudi. It's very difficult. Ibn Khaldun, who many people regard as the father of sociology, he had a startling insight, 600, 700 years ago. He said, a people whose economy is based solely on a natural resource is doomed. They're doomed, right? They're given to extravagance. Because I mean, literally the money is growing on trees. When you say the money is just coming out of the ground. One does not need any industry. One does not need, he's like, it induces laziness. There's a lack of inventiveness. There's a lack of creativity. He probably could have said, and without those things, in the modern world, there's a lack of cultural authority. It's like, I think about a lot of the Gulf nations in that way. It's like, I think they're in a very, very difficult position. And now the world is moving quickly toward renewable energy, which, I mean, they've had a great run. The Black American comedian Steve Harvey said that he visited Jeddah or something. He said that he was in a room, Steve Harvey. He visited Jeddah. He said he visited Jeddah. I was listening to the radio. He said that he mentioned in a room with some people that Jeff Bezos was the wealthiest man in the world, and they all started laughing. He said that he mentioned that Jeff Bezos was the wealthiest man in the world, and they started laughing. Because of course they don't publish their wealth, right? The Qatari royal family, the Saudi royal family, the Emiratis, they don't, because if they publish their wealth, it would be obscene to people. Their personal fortunes, trillions. It would be obscene to people if you knew how much money these people really had. And so there's a great, I say all of that to say, I still want to be able to make Hajj Umrah. I think there's a great scramble to figure out, one, how to be economically solvent if the world is changing to renewable kind of energy and moving away from oil. Two, how to gain some cultural authority, right? Because I don't think they've ever really had any. And I think that, you know, these are, I won't call them desperate attempts, but these are the attempts, you know. There's also a lot of investment in education. A friend of mine worked at NYU Abu Dhabi for a very long time. And when I asked him what was the experience like, he just said, they're serious about it. I mean, I don't know how serious the students are. The students don't know anything about working hard in school, but they're serious about throwing money at the issue of education.
So one of my classmates and friends is the deputy trade minister of Saudi Arabia. We met when he was here for schooling. So he actually, this past couple of months, was working on a trade deal where they're going to build an electric car battery factory in Saudi Arabia.
They're serious about it. A friend of mine told me a story that they said, look, we don't know anything about education, and we want first-rate institutions of higher learning here in the Emirates. They said John Sexton, the president of NYU, said to him, if you really want to do this, we're starting off at 100 million to NYU just to, they said the guy wrote the check like, okay, so what else? Are you ready to go? he said, he's just like, whoa, you wrote $100 million check. This is nothing. So, there's definitely serious about throwing money at the problem. What is worrisome for me is, education is, subhanAllah, man. Education is everything. And if you have students being educated in a secular worldview, I don't know what this will mean for those societies. I don't know how long they will be able to, prop up these monarchies. Because or maybe there's some kind of censorship. I don't know. But if you really empower people with the liberal arts and make them thinking people, they might, I don't know, they might gravitate toward other kinds of, political and governmental assembly. I think that's an issue. And then in terms of their iman, subhanAllah, that's just another kettle of fish entirely. What will happen to kind of the faith and the familial and tribal ethic of those people when now all of their education is being imported from Europe and America?
I feel like that's already been happening for at least decades.
Among the
Well,
elite.
right, both of their children. And then I don't think that it's necessarily dramatically changed.
I think it's slowly and imperceptibly, but dramatically changed. People that, like one of my teachers said he first visited, the Arab world in like the late 70s. He says like, from then until now, there's no comparison.
I'm not going to express a view on it, but I was reading today that I think in January of this year, a group of Israeli businessmen visited Medina, and that they, in advance of that move, they've taken down Muslims-only signs on highways.
Yeah, no, it's a different, like when you are eager to, join, the world race, as it were, you can make many regrettable mistakes. The fact that they are mistakes is something we will only recognize much later. But I don't know. At base level, I don't think there's anything objectionable about building a city. Building a a place that is a mix of, residential and commercial properties that people will inhabit. Prima facie, on the face of it, I can't see anything wrong with that. But what kind of city will it be? Well, I don't know. I don't know. I know when I was in the Emirates, the last time I was in the Emirates, I don't know. It was just, I didn't like it. I mean, alhamdulillah. I mean, it's not a place for me. I want to go if I want to go. I'll make that clear. If I want to go, I don't want to be denied entry. But it's kind of like, see, and I'm gonna say something that could get me in some trouble. Salafiyah, right? That minhaj. I don't think they have ever taken culture seriously. It's an expression of religion for whom song unimportant, art really unimportant. Even calligraphy is frowned upon, right? Now, calligraphy is frowned upon. Other forms of expression and design frowned upon. Even though religious innovation is frowned upon, I think innovation generally is not something highly emphasized. It's a very rear-facing, hide-bound kind of worldview. Now, you might think that you're just being puritanical. We're just being pure. We're keeping our expression of Islam free of all the negative influence. But what you're actually doing is creating a vacuum that the West will just come and fill with its culture. That's why if you don't create positive culture that's reflective of your values, then the West, they will give you a culture. You need some culture, we'll give you some.
It's a little ironic, but there's someone recently built a museum of Islamic art in Doha, and the building was designed by IMK because why wouldn't you have the architecture of the Museum of Islamic Art designed by an Islamic architect?
I visited the Louvre Abu Dhabi. I was in Yemen. One of my classmates said to me, culture in the Arab world is a rendition of an imitation. It's a rendition of an imitation. This is a rendition of an imitation. This isn't even like, because some people, they definitely, look, for me, culture is circular. I don't think it's really sensible to talk about culture as having like a point of origin. Who knows? It's like, okay, that's their, well, where did they get it from? Culture is circular. But some people practice the cultures they emulate with such excellence that they take some ownership of that culture, like the Japanese. Like you look at like classical music composers and a lot of other things that the Japanese clearly learned through their encounter with Europeans, but they practice those cultures with such seriousness and depth that it's almost like they're doing it at a higher level than the people from whom they learned it. But the rendition of an imitation is when it's not that you're engaging any of this deeply. It's just a rendition of an imitation. Because imitation is not always bad. Right? To imitate something good, and he used to live in Sharjah, right? To imitate something good is, we should all want to imitate things that are good. But when you don't even imitate well, you just get the most obvious components. And it's not to gain any real benefit from this. It's just really to claim membership into some club by saying we have it. So when you see like the Louvre Abu Dhabi, is this really like, setting aside for a moment, kind of a different, let's say, ethos of Islamic art and European art. Just setting aside, let's just set that aside for a minute. Even European art in all of its depth, all of its, all of whatever it is, are you really interested in that? I mean, is your engagement with this to the tune of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, really indicative of some cultural value that you see in this art? Or is it just to say, hey, I have it too? That's the rendition of imitation.
It's
You said that's the rendition of imitation.
Jean-Paul Baudrillard, it's the difference between simulation and simulacrum.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. It's the difference between just trying to just show, yeah, we're civilized. We have a museum of fine art. But as far as the institutions, from institutions of education to civil society, et cetera, that would indicate a real engagement with this art, none of that's really there. You spent $100 million to say, I belong. I'm kind of European too, kind of, a little, maybe, not at all, really. I mean, it's as you can feel that cheapness. There's a cheapness there. There's an unoriginality there that you can feel, man. And for me, as an African American, I feel it very deeply, because the African American story is the exact opposite. It's the opposite of all of that. It is when you have nothing materially, and yet you produce culture that is so authentic, so rich, so compelling, so beautiful, that everybody around the world admires it. You don't have anything. You don't have any money. Now, I'm not giving a religious ruling on those things, but I'm just saying, as a historical fact, you don't have any money. I don't have any political power. I don't have any money. But it's an expression of soul. And so for all the money that exists in those societies, you just don't see any soul. Right? It seems sterile, it seems hollow, it seems empty, at least to me. At least to me. You just don't see an expression of soul. It's like, even culture that, I might take issue with. The fact that it's coming from, an authentic place is undeniable. Like, if you visit Paris and you walk around, it's something, it's something. Not that, a lot of the sculpture and stuff like that, totally not my taste and sensibility as a Muslim, but that the people who produced this culture were very serious about what they were doing. I think that much is very clear. You go to Abu Dhabi, you feel the exact opposite. This isn't serious. This isn't serious. This isn't serious. This is not serious. But now it's looking like, don't say that, bro. No,
the thing to me is that, like, when I look at those countries, right, at the end of the day, like, they did good for their citizens. Like,
yeah, that's real.
They don't come. Like,
that's real.
From our country, we
You have to.
We go back. We can't.
I appreciate that. It's like, and that's the thing. I do appreciate that. The fact that they share the natural, the money, the revenue generated from the natural resource. I think that's something to be commended. It's like, there are no poor Emiratis. They say that when you turn 18, the government just give you money. Then you want to buy a house, they just give you money. You want to get married, they give you money. But you can already see what Ibn Khaldun was talking about. That induces laziness. You have a baby, they give you money. And you said, not your money, not me. This is in the United Arab Emirates, UAE. It's kind of like, and they should. The money, the source of the money is oil. The money is literally beneath the soil. This isn't a product of anybody's industry. I mean, it has to be refined. I mean, it's enough. It's petrol, but it's not a source of anybody's. I mean, the money is the gift from Allah. Just give it. But they only give it to their citizens. They won't, and you can. There's no naturalization. You cannot become. And a lot of people say that. And not only that, there's no naturalization, and very few civic institutions for non-citizens, like public schools. And this is something. I'm not saying we should be embarrassed, but we have to really think about what global leadership is. Because see, we'll talk about America, especially my people. These are the things that you just would not see in America. See, in America, you wouldn't see that.
Yeah, I don't think their culture is kind of just like, this is our country, come here for a limited time, display your skills.
That's it.
Eventually,
That's it.
so I think it's more geared towards like the indigenous, like
this is who we are, and this is what we build. That's what. But I think the fact, and see, for me, I always feel like I watched that movie on Netflix. I know you guys are Muslim, you know why movie. I watched that movie on Netflix, The Swimmers, about Syrian refugees, and they're trying to get to Germany. That's worth watching, right? But the thing that just hurts me is I remember when you had all of those Syrian refugees, and Chancellor Angela Merkel, she said, Mecca and Medina or something like that are closer than Germany, closer than Berlin, saying if something happens to Muslims, they're trying to get to Europe for our aid. They're not trying to get to Saudi Arabia because they know they're not going to get anything in Saudi Arabia. They're not going to get anything. They're not going to get anything in the UAE. But they're trying to get to Germany. They're trying to get to Portugal. They're trying to get to Spain because these are places that people believe have more of a humanitarian ethic.
But do you think that like they would have the right to shut somebody out, considering that like those countries colonized the whole world?
Yeah, but that is a source of the leadership, like the British Commonwealth, seeing as though these were all colonies of Britain. We're not in a position to deny, somebody, migrating to our country for asylum, politically or economically, but as long as that's the case, I think Europe, and by extension America, is the world's de facto leader. There's an Arabic proverb that says, everybody can clamor about who's the leader. I'm the leader, I'm the leader. The one that people go to when they're having problems, she or he is really the leader. Makes no difference what we say. When you're having problems, the one that you say, help me, that's the leader. And in the world right now, that's still Europe, that's still the US. People have a problem, help me, help me.
The source of and the cause of all the problems.
Yeah, the source of and the cause of the problem. But I'm just saying, but the one that says, the one that people expect to be aided by, that's the leader. And all I'm saying is that if we really have this embarrassment of riches, that, I don't know, seems pretty apparent when you visit these societies, although these are just Douay Lad China, these are very small, places. Comparing like the economy of the Emirates to the economy of the United States of America is like comparing the economy of New Hampshire to the economy of California, something like that. It's just, there's no comparison. But I don't know, man. It hurts me though when I think about, that Muslims are always being put in compromised positions, and European nations are always forced to support and aid, people from Muslim nations. I don't know. It could be simplistic in my thinking. It's like you said, they're the cause, both of you mentioned, they're the cause of the problem. They should be They should be opening their borders. But, self-sufficiency should be the goal of every people. Right? In fact, I think self-sufficiency and self-respect, they're coterminous, they go hand in hand. How will you ever gain self-respect if you're not self-sufficient? That's why I didn't like Black Lives Matter. If I need somebody else to tell me that my life, no, if I need somebody else to tell me that my life matters, I'm in trouble. If I need you to tell me that my life matters, I'm in trouble.
You know about Black Lives Matter? How many black men were killed?
Black Lives Matter? Killed?
Assassinated.
I ain't heard about that one.
Yeah. 5 blacks, 1 Palestinian.
Really? So I ain't heard about that one.
5 blacks and 1 Palestinian.
I ain't heard about that.
Black Lives Matter. I told Wiley was going to give a talk in New Jersey. That's what I was going to do. I said, you don't know what's going on, why?
So I don't know.
We have a lot of stuff going on.
No, I really, but I think that conceptually, man, if you have to tell somebody else, that's why like the it's almost there. When Kanye came out the White Lives Matter shirt, yeah, I think that was a step too far. But I actually understood the person that says to someone else, your life matters. I'm in a position of advantage. If I say, your life matters. In a sense, I'm actually saying that I have the right. I'm in a position to confer dignity onto your life. You're fine. You're okay. You're fine. Like I don't know, man. It's strange. Maybe we'll switch next week to 99 Names, but I'll get the book this week and then we'll work on it. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر آمين يا رب العالمين. Yeah, well, it'll pick up from next week, inshallah. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.